The Hall of Judgment was cold and dark. Tall stone walls reached up into shadows. Blue flames floated near the ceiling, giving weak light. 12 alien leaders from the Vorgan Empire sat in a wide circle. They were dressed in armor made from the bones of great beasts. Some had horns, others had tusks, and all had glowing red eyes. They waited for the human diplomat. They expected a team, or maybe a soldier in a sharp suit, with guards beside her and weapons hidden in her coat. But only one human entered. She was small, thin, and calm. Her long black hair was tied in a braid. She wore a plain gray dress, boots with no metal, and no jewelry. Her hands were empty. A few of the aliens leaned forward, confused. Some began to grin. One even coughed to hide a laugh. The high warlord of the Vorgan, Lord Kral, stood up. He was tall as a tree and thick as stone. Sharp metal grew from his back like blades. His voice was deep, shaking the floor. "This is your best negotiator?" he asked. "This little human girl." He laughed. Then others joined in. Even the guards near the door chuckled. The human girl did not move. Her face showed no fear. She looked around the circle slowly, like a teacher studying students. Then she nodded once, as if she had seen enough. She stepped into the center of the room and said one word: "Yelena." Lord Kral raised an eyebrow. "What is that?" "Your name." "Yes," she said. "Just that." He smirked. "And what threat does a yelena bring to the throne of the Vorgan Empire?" Yelena tilted her head slightly. "No threat at all," she said, "unless you wake what sleeps beneath the name." The laughter stopped. Kral's eyes narrowed. He motioned to his side. A soldier stepped forward with a scanner in his hand. The small device was made to detect weapons, poisons, and explosives. He pointed it at Yelena and tapped the button. The scanner sparked. Then it hissed. Then it melted. The liquid metal dropped to the floor and burned a hole in the stone. Yelena still did not move. The soldier stepped back in fear. A chill spread through the room. Kral's smile faded. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice now low and rough. Yelena looked at him. She did not blink. "Ask your great-grandfathers," she said. A silence grew heavy in the room. Even the blue flames seemed to dim. She took one step forward. "They called me Baba Yaga." The name floated through the air like smoke. Some of the older aliens gasped. One dropped his cup. Another stepped back from his chair, whispering, "No, that is just an old human myth." Yelena turned her eyes toward him. "Is it?" The flames flickered. The shadows along the walls began to shift. Yelena's voice stayed calm. "The humans came in peace. Your empire broke the treaty. You thought we would send armies. But the council sent me." Kral growled, but his hands trembled slightly. "You are bluffing," he said. "Baba Yaga is a story. A ghost." Yelena took another step. "So are you, Kral. Your name will be forgotten in a year. Mine has lasted for centuries. In every culture. Under every sky." Kral drew his blade, a long curved weapon made from crystal. It hissed when it left its sheath. Yelena did not move. "Try it," she said softly, "and your blood will sing to your ancestors." Kral paused. A cold wind passed through the chamber. The walls groaned like they were alive. Yelena smiled for the first time. "I did not come to fight," she said. "I came to warn you." She turned and began to walk away. No one stopped her. At the door, she paused. "This empire is built on fear, but fear can be taken away." And then she left. The flames flickered once more, then returned to normal. But no one spoke for a long time. In the shadows, something unseen watched them, and it smiled too. Whispers behind steel doors. After Yelena left the judgment hall, the doors closed behind her with a deep groan. Silence fell heavy on the Vorgan Empire's inner council. Lord Kral did not return to his seat. His blade was still in his hand, but now it hung loose by his side. The others watched him, waiting for orders, but none came. Kral stared at the floor where the scanner had melted. Smoke still rose from the blackened stone. He remembered stories told in the dark days of his youth, warnings from old warriors who barely survived the first human wars. Tales of a shadow, a name whispered during nightmares, of an immortal hunter in human skin. Baba Yaga. He had laughed at those stories once. Now he was no longer sure. Deep inside the imperial fortress, in a hidden chamber far below the city, the council met in secret. Their advisors, spies, and warcasters had gathered to discuss the human girl. Not the human army, not their ships, just her. They spoke in low tones, arguing over her powers, her past, her true identity. One elder claimed he saw her long ago, when he was still a cub. She had come to a treaty signing on another world, wearing the same gray dress. Another claimed she was seen centuries ago on a battlefield, walking through fire, untouched by flames, dragging a broken alien warlord behind her like a doll. None had proof, but all felt the same cold unease settle in their bones. Meanwhile, Yelena walked calmly through the crowded lower streets of the capital. She blended with the shadows, though people moved away from her without knowing why. Even machines paused slightly as she passed. She made her way to a small house near the edge of the city walls. It looked abandoned, with vines growing over the windows and dust on the steps. But when she opened the door, the lights came on inside without sound. The walls were lined with old books and weapons, not high-tech, but simple things: wooden spears, iron chains, and masks carved from stone. She moved through the rooms as if returning home after a long journey. At the center of the house was a round table. She placed her hands on it, and slowly a circle of blue light rose from the surface. A hologram flickered to life, an old human face, scared and tired, but full of wisdom. It was General Halleck, the last living commander of the human resistance. His voice came through the air, soft and serious. "They laughed, didn't they?" Yelena nodded. "They always do. And now, they're afraid." Halleck leaned forward. "Good. They should be. But fear is only the first step. You must go deeper." Yelena looked out the window at the distant spires of the Empire's palace. "They think I'm a ghost," she said, "but they've forgotten what ghosts really do." Back in the Imperial fortress, Kral finally broke the silence of the war room. "Bring me the prisoner," he said. A door opened. 2 guards dragged in a small alien figure, thin and bruised. He was a translator who once worked for the Human Alliance before being caught and imprisoned. Kral walked up to him and leaned close. "Who is she?" he demanded. "The girl. Yelena." The prisoner coughed. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth. He looked up with one eye swollen shut. "You think she's a diplomat?" he whispered. "You think humans send diplomats into a war council alone?" Kral snarled. "What is she then?" The prisoner gave a broken smile. "She is what waits in the dark when your monsters run away." Kral struck him across the face. "Tell me her real name." The prisoner said nothing. Just that same broken smile. Kral stormed out. That night, across the Empire, strange things began to happen. Security cameras blinked out for seconds at a time. Guards at border gates reported seeing shadows that vanished when approached. Secret data files were found corrupted. Only one word remained in each file: Yelena. An old general woke from a nightmare screaming. In his dream, he saw a wooden house walking on iron legs, chasing him through fire. Yelena stood alone on the rooftop of her small house, the wind pulling gently at her braid. In her hand, she held an old wooden ring, smooth and carved with tiny runes. She whispered to the sky, "They forgot me." The wind answered in a strange whisper, like leaves sliding across old bones. She smiled. "I'll remind them." And somewhere far beneath the capital, under miles of stone, something ancient began to stir. The girl who walks through walls on the 3rd night after Yelena's visit. A cold fog rolled across the Vorgan capital. It was not the kind of fog made by machines or weather towers. It came from deep places, from cracks in the ground no one remembered digging. It drifted along the metal streets and climbed the stairs of shining towers. It slid through vents, past locked doors, and into the dreams of soldiers who had never feared anything before. Many awoke shaking, unable to speak. Others wept quietly, hiding their tears from their bunkmates. None could explain what they had seen. They only remembered two things: the gray dress and the eyes like frozen rivers. In the highest tower of the palace, Lord Kral sat before a giant war map. His empire stretched across 5 systems. His fleets were unmatched. But now every dot of red on the map, every outpost, every stronghold, seemed smaller than before. Each one felt vulnerable, weak, like they were not guarded, but watched. Kral had not slept in 2 days. He reviewed reports, but they all sounded like madness. A warship found its own crew locked inside their quarters, doors sealed with ancient runes that no one could read. A prison guard fell into a trance and carved a message into the wall with his own claws. The woods have legs. A vorgan noble's child refused to speak, only drawing the same picture again and again. A house with chicken legs walking across the stars. Kral slammed his fist against the table. "Enough stories," he growled. "Bring me the witch." The guards exchanged nervous glances. "We don't know where she is, my lord." Kral bared his teeth. "Then find her, or I'll find you instead." But even as he spoke, Yelena was already inside the palace. She didn't break in. She didn't fight guards or disable alarms. She walked, simply walked, like she had every right to be there. Her footsteps made no sound. Cameras flickered as she passed, confused by her shape. Doors opened without codes. Some guards blinked and found her gone. Others never saw her at all, only smelled pine needles and old smoke before the cold touched their skin. Yelena moved through the palace like a shadow remembering its own path. She passed walls carved with the names of vorgan kings. She passed old thrones now covered in dust. The empire had ruled for hundreds of years, but its heart had grown fat and hollow. She could feel it, the rot under the gold. She stopped in front of a glass case in the War Museum. Inside was a long, thin blade made of black metal. It was labeled the last sword of Earth. Below it was a short paragraph, mocking in tone, describing how the humans surrendered, how their warriors were weak, and how their last general wept before handing over the blade. Yelena placed her hand on the glass. It shattered. No sound, just a soft breath of wind. She took the sword, not like a thief, more like someone taking back something that had been misplaced. She turned, and the lights behind her dimmed. The fog outside thickened. Whispers began to echo down the hall. The Baba Yaga walks. A young guard nearby froze. He had only joined the palace ranks 2 weeks ago. When he saw her, he raised his weapon with shaking hands. Yelena paused and looked at him gently. "You're too young," she said. "Go home." His weapon clicked, then jammed. He stared in panic, but she had already vanished by the time he looked up again. Yelena did not come to kill. Not yet. She came to remind. On the top level of the palace, in a chamber made of silver and bone, Kral stood before a mirror. He saw his reflection flicker. It shifted, not just his face, but his shape. For a moment, he was not Kral. He was a child again, hiding under a blanket, listening to his father speak of the old terrors, of a human witch who lived between stars, a creature that did not die, did not bleed, and did not forget. He blinked, and in the mirror she stood behind him. No sound, no warning, just those quiet winter eyes. Kral spun around, his blade raised. No one was there. But on the table beside him, one single pine cone had been placed, dry, sharp, fresh from a forest that no longer existed. He did not touch it. Instead, he fell back into his seat, staring at the object like it might bite. Yelena had sent her first message, and the Empire had finally heard it. The archive of broken truths. Deep beneath the Vorgan capital, under layers of black stone and plasma-welded steel, there was a vault no one spoke of. Not even the High Warlord dared enter it without 3 witnesses and a full security team. It was called the Archive of Broken Truths. The Empire claimed it was a relic hall, a place to store the remains of fallen enemies and failed uprisings. But the truth was different. Far older, far more dangerous. The archive held things the Empire could not destroy. Stories too wild to be lies. Items too strange to be explained. Memories sealed in metal boxes and buried in silence. And on the 4th night, Yelena walked through its locked doors. No alarms sounded. No guards were present. The lights inside hummed dimly, as if trying to remember how to shine. Dust floated through the air like dead snowflakes. Everything was still. Untouched, forgotten. The walls were lined with ancient shelves, not digital, but carved from dark wood. Drawers were labeled by hand, their tags yellowed by time and fear. Yelena moved slowly through the room, fingers trailing the edges of broken files, cracked datapads, and shattered weapons. She paused at one drawer and opened it. Inside was a small bottle filled with a red mist. On the tag was a single line, scribbled in haste, found after she left. "We lost 2 moons that day." Yelena closed the drawer gently, as if not to disturb the memory. She passed cabinets full of bones. Not human, not alien. Something in between. They were twisted, scorched, frozen in silent screams. Some still wore medals from alien wars long ended. Others had no faces left. In the far corner, hidden behind a collapsed shelf, she found what she had come for. A rusted box marked only with the old human symbol for warning. Her hands hovered over it for a moment, then pressed the release. It hissed open. Inside were 3 items. A torn piece of an Earth military coat, a photo of a young girl standing beside a wooden hut, and a page written in a mix of Vorgan and English, as if someone had tried to translate a story not meant to be told. Yelena picked up the paper. She does not knock. She does not call. She walks between shadows and waits for silence. She is the house in the woods, the voice in your sleep. If she smiles, run. Yelena folded the page and tucked it into her coat. Behind her, the lights dimmed further, and then a voice spoke from the darkness. "You shouldn't be here." Yelena turned slowly. A Vorgan stood there, old, tall, hunched over with time and secrets. His eyes were milky, but his voice was sharp. He was a keeper of the archive, one of the last living guardians of memory. "They buried the truth," he said. "They said you were a myth." Yelena looked at him. "What do you say?" He gave a bitter laugh. "I say I've seen stars die with less power than your name. But they don't care about truth anymore. They only care about control. Then they've already lost." "Will you kill them?" he asked. Yelena shook her head. "Not yet. I want them to see the forest grow around their throne. I want them to smell the smoke before the fire reaches their door." He stepped aside. "Then you'll need the other half of the story." Yelena raised an eyebrow. The old keeper walked to a hidden panel behind the shelf. He pressed his hand against it, and the wall slid open to reveal a narrow chamber lit by a single green flame. Inside was a mirror, but it didn't show reflections. It showed memories. Yelena stepped forward and saw her own face, but not as she was now. She saw herself long ago, as a young girl standing on a battlefield beside a burning house. She saw herself holding a wooden staff, chanting words older than war. She saw the moment she chose to disappear from history and become something else, something not human, something deeper. Behind her, the keeper whispered, "You didn't just survive. You became what they fear." Yelena nodded. "Then it's time they remember." She left the archive without a sound. But the memories followed her, and the Empire began to shake. Far above, in the palace, Kral woke from a dream with blood in his mouth and dirt on his hands. His sheets smelled like ash, and his room was filled with crows, all of them silent, all of them watching. The past had come back, and it was wearing a gray dress. The forest grows inside the palace. The Vorgan palace was no longer quiet. The halls, once proud and echoing with the march of armored feet, now whispered with strange sounds. Wood creaked where there had never been trees. The marble floors of the royal wing had begun to crack, thin green vines curling through the breaks like veins in old skin. No one dared speak of it, but the servants had noticed first. Small mushrooms blooming overnight on the ceilings, and the faint scent of pine that followed them wherever they went. Some guards claimed they saw branches behind mirrors. Others swore they heard footsteps on the stone roof above their quarters, footsteps that ended in scratching and breath. Yelena had not returned to the war council. She didn't need to. The palace itself had become her voice. Every corridor felt narrower now, though none had moved. Every light seemed dimmer, though none had failed. Fear grew inside the walls, silent and wet like rot behind golden paint. Kroll tried to keep control. He ordered engineers to scan the structure, to purge the air systems, to burn the roots with fire. Nothing worked. The machines broke, the roots grew back, and the fire always went out, like it was swallowed by something deeper than the palace itself. On the 7th level of the tower, in a private chamber built only for kings, Kroll gathered his personal guard. Warriors with no names, raised in darkness, loyal only to him. They sat at his table, silent and armored in black. Kroll stood before them, face hard, jaw clenched. The pinnacone was still on his desk, untouched. It hadn't decayed. It hadn't moved. But it had changed. It now bled sap that shimmered like gold and smelled like snow. "We kill her tonight," Kroll said. "No more tricks. No more legends. I want her body hung from the spire by dawn." His guards said nothing. They simply stood, nodded, and began the hunt. But Yelena was not hiding. She had made her home. At the edge of the imperial city, where metal ended and wild ground began, the trees had begun to move. It was slow at first, harmless, birds nesting in power lines, moss along the walls of old storage bays. But now the forest was inside the city. No one had planted it. No one could stop it. And still it grew. Yelena walked through it barefoot. Her boots hung from one hand, her other held a bundle of dry herbs wrapped in cloth. Around her, the trees did not sway, even though there was wind. They stood still, like guards on watch, silent, tall, and ancient, and behind them, something much older waited. A house. But not like any the Vorgans had ever seen. This house stood on two thick iron legs. It groaned when it moved, not from rust, but from memory. It was made of crooked wood, patched with stone and bone. Lights glowed from inside like eyes watching from a cave. Yelena placed the herbs on the doorstep. The door opened. Inside, voices murmured. Voices not from this world. They spoke of things forgotten. Wars that had no winners, curses written in blood, children who vanished into mirrors and returned with different names. The house remembered everything. Yelena stepped inside. The floorboards bent, but did not break. She walked past shelves filled with jars. Some held roots, others held time. In the center of the room sat a fire with no smoke. It burned cold. Beside it, a chair carved from living wood twisted gently, as if breathing. A voice rose from the shadows. "You called me back," it said. Yelena nodded. "They need to see." "And what will you show them?" She looked into the fire. "What happens when you forget who you fear?" Outside, the sky above the palace turned red, not with war, not with fire, but with leaves. In Kroll's throne room, one of the black-armored guards returned. Alone. His armor was cracked, his mask gone, his eyes wide with silence. "Well?" Kroll growled. The guard fell to his knees. "We found the forest, my lord, but the forest found us first." Kroll rose from his throne. "You mean to say you failed?" The guard did not answer. His mouth was open, but no words came. Only a single leaf fell from his lips. "The warlord steps into the woods." The Vorgan capital no longer felt like a city. It felt like a dream that had gone too long without waking. Glass towers now had roots coiling around their bases. Statues of former emperors wept black sap. Birds sang old human lullabies in tongues no one remembered teaching them. And in the quiet streets, where once metal feet marched in rhythm, the sounds of bells echoed. Soft, distant, uneven, like they were swinging from branches no one could see. Kral watched from the top of his palace as the forest crept inward. It did not grow fast. It did not charge. It arrived. Quiet, sure, slow as death. He had once laughed at the humans, at their myths, at their fragile bodies and sentimental stories. Now he could not sleep without hearing leaves brush against his walls. He could not breathe without tasting smoke that did not rise from fire. He had tried everything. Flamethrowers, acid drones, purification beams, prayers whispered in long-dead languages. The forest swallowed it all. It bent, it burned, but it came back stronger, thicker, more certain. It was not just plants. It was memory. It was will. It was her. And so Kral made the choice that only fools or kings make. He chose to go in. He left the palace just before dusk, wrapped in his armor of black bone and metal. He carried the last sword of the Vorgan kings, an obsidian blade etched with words only he could read. 5 of his best warriors followed him. None returned. The forest did not move as they entered. It simply waited. Kral walked past trees older than the city itself. Bark peeled in strange patterns. Faces, names, warnings. Shadows moved where no sun reached. Voices called his name from behind him. His sword grew heavy. His breath turned cold. He came to a clearing. The air was different here. Thick, still, filled with the scent of wet earth and something sweeter, like honey and rust. And in the center stood the house, on legs. It turned to face him with no eyes, yet Kral felt seen. He stepped forward. "Yelena," he roared. "Enough of this. Face me." The door creaked open. She stepped out, barefoot, no armor, no crown, just the gray dress. Her braid hung over one shoulder. In her hand, she held no weapon, just a ring of dried herbs bound by red thread. Kral's rage broke like glass. "You think this is war? You think trees and tricks will bring down the empire?" Yelena looked at him with eyes that held no fear, only memory. "This was never about war," she said. "This was about remembering." "Remembering what?" He spat. "What you did, what you destroyed, what you buried." She stepped closer. The earth moved with her. Roots stirred beneath her feet. Kral raised his sword. Yelena did not flinch. "They said you were a myth," Kral growled. "A ghost, a name humans whispered to scare their children." "And you believed them," she whispered. He swung. The blade moved fast, sharp as the scream of a falling star. But it did not reach her. The forest caught it. Vines wrapped around his arm. Branches snapped from the trees and tangled his feet. Moss grew along the blade, dulling its edge. He tried to pull free, but the forest was stronger, not with muscle, with memory. Yelena stepped close, now just a breath away. "You forgot us," she said, "but we remember everything." Kral struggled, his eyes wild. "What are you?" She leaned in, her voice like cold wind in an old room. "I am the story that survives the fire. I am the price of forgetting." And with that, she raised her hand. A single leaf fell from the sky and landed on Kral's chest. He screamed, not from pain, from recognition. In that moment, he saw it all. His empire, not a crown, but a cage. His victories, not honor, but ashes. His name, not feared, but forgotten. He saw the ruins of every world he had conquered, and in the middle of each ruin, a shadow wearing her face. The forest took him. Yelena turned and walked away. The trees closed behind her. and the throne of the Vorgan Empire stood empty for the first time in 300 years. The roots remember her name. The Vorgan palace stood silent. No horns blew. No guards marched. No banners flew from the high towers. For the first time in living memory, the empire's capital knew stillness. Not the stillness of peace, but the kind that follows a storm when everyone is too afraid to ask what comes next. The forest did not leave. It stayed, not to conquer, but to remind. The vines curled around the stone pillars like fingers gently holding a broken arm. Flowers bloomed on shattered statues. Moss covered the sharp edges of forgotten weapons. No one gave the order. No one stopped it. No one dared. Within days, news spread across the stars. The warlord Kral had vanished into the woods. His black armored guards were never found. Some whispered that the trees had grown eyes. Others claimed to see a house with legs walking across the hills under the starlight. They didn't speak of it loudly. They didn't have to. Everyone already knew. Yelena never gave a speech. She didn't need to raise a flag or sit on a throne. She returned to the capital once, quietly, walking the same streets where she had once been laughed at. No one laughed this time. No one spoke. They watched her move through the city like a memory returning home. In the center of the great square, where Kral once declared victory over the human worlds, Yelena placed something on the stone. Not a sword, not a banner. A chair. A small wooden chair, worn smooth by time. The kind a grandmother might sit in by the fire. She left it there and walked away. And for some reason, no one dared move it. Not the new leaders who tried to rebuild the empire from its ashes. Not the merchants who returned to reopen the markets. Not the diplomats from other systems who came seeking answers. It remained untouched, a quiet reminder that the forest had been there. That she had been there. The empire changed after that. Some planets declared independence. Others tore down statues and replaced them with gardens. Warships were melted into plows. And on every world that once feared the Vorgan banner, the same message began to appear, scratched into stone, painted on walls, carved into trees. The Baba Yaga remembers. On Earth, the old General Halleck watched the broadcasts in silence. He sat in a cabin deep in the snowy north, far from the noise of politics and news. When he saw her again, standing in the square, he smiled. She did it, he whispered. She reminded them. Behind him, a small wooden house creaked in the cold wind. Deep in the woods beyond the stars, the house with iron legs moved once more. It did not run. It wandered. Slowly, patiently, following no path but memory. Inside, Yelena sat by the cold fire, a book in her lap. She wasn't reading it. She was remembering it. Outside, the trees stood like old friends. And somewhere far away, a child on a distant world asked her grandmother, "Is the Baba Yaga real?" The old woman smiled. "Oh yes," she said softly. "She is real. She wears no crown. She rides no beast. She doesn't carry a sword. But she carries something far heavier." "What is it?" The old woman looked out the window at the forest line. "She carries the weight of being remembered, and that more than armies, more than weapons, more than fear, was why the empire fell. Not because she fought, but because she came back, and she made them remember."